He sat in the last row, hood up, saying nothing, as two ushers grabbed his blind mother and dragged her out for kneeling in the wrong seat. He didn't stand, he didn't shout, he only whispered, "Remember this day." Nobody in that church understood why he stayed silent until the truth came out. Just moments earlier, before the blind widow was dragged through those church doors, this was how it all began. The trouble began when the head usher, a sharp-mouthed woman named Nkem, marched down the aisle in her white gloves. She had a paper in her hand and fire in her eyes. "Mama, get up," she said, loud enough for the whole church to hear. "This row is reserved today. Chief Tunde is bringing important guests. People of your kind cannot sit here." Mama Adana lifted her blind eyes toward the voice. "My daughter," she said, softly, "I have knelt in this same seat since before you were born. I will move if you help me find another." But Nkem did not want to help her move. Nkem wanted to make an example of her. "Your kind?" the old woman whispered, confused. "What kind am I?" The church went quiet. Some people looked down at their hands. Others hid small smiles behind their hymn books. And in the back row, the quiet man's jaw tightened, but he did not move, not yet, because he wanted to see exactly how far these people would go, and they were about to go very far. Nkem clapped her hands twice, and two big ushers came forward. Without warning, they grabbed Mama Adana by both arms and lifted her off her knees. Her walking stick fell and rolled under the pew. "Please," she cried, "I cannot see. Wait, let me hold something." But they did not wait. They dragged her down the aisle, her cracked sandals scraping the cold floor, her wrapper coming loose at the waist. The whole church watched a blind widow being pulled out of God's house like a bag of dirty clothes. Some people gasped. Nobody stood up. Not the deacons, not the choir, not even Pastor Ayo, who simply looked away and adjusted his fine agbada. They dragged her through the doors and left her sitting in the dust of the church compound, blinking at a sun she could not see. And through all of it, the quiet man in the back row stayed in his seat. He watched his mother hit the ground. He closed his eyes for 1 second, then he whispered 4 words that nobody heard. "Remember this day." Now you would ask, what kind of son sits still while his own mother is dragged in the dirt? That is the question the whole town would ask later when they finally understood who he was. But on that morning, nobody knew him. They saw only a poor stranger who rose slowly, pulled his hood lower, and walked out through the side door without a word. Outside, he did not run to his mother. He stood behind a mango tree and watched a kind young woman rush to help her instead. A nurse named Zuri, who knelt in the dust, gathered the old woman's wrapper and wiped her face with the edge of her own dress. "Mama, lean on me," Zuri said. "I have you." The old woman wept, not from pain, but from shame. And the man behind the mango tree wrote that young nurse's face into his memory, the same way he wrote Nkem's and Pastor Ayo's, and the name that had started it all, Chief Tunde. Then he turned and disappeared down the road. He had work to do. Chief Tunde was the richest man in Umwola, and the church belonged to him in every way that mattered. He had built the new roof, he had bought the big generator, he paid Pastor Ayo's salary, so Pastor Ayo preached whatever Chief Tunde wanted to hear. When Tunde's shiny jeep rolled into the compound an hour later, he stepped over the same dust where the widow had fallen and never even asked what happened. His gold watch caught the light. To him, Mama Adana was less than a fly. But here is what Chief Tunde did not know. He did not know that the blind woman he had thrown away was once the wife of the man he had robbed many years ago. He did not know her son had come home, and he did not know that the quiet stranger who walked out of his church that morning had already begun counting every cruel thing this town had done. To understand why, we must go back to how Mama Adana became so poor and alone. Many years before, Mama Adana was not poor. She had a husband, a strong, quiet man everyone in Umwola called Papa Obina, after their only son. Papa Obina owned a wide piece of land at the edge of town, land passed down from his own father, good land near the main road that everyone knew would one day be worth plenty of money. They were not rich, but they ate 3 times a day. Their son went to a good school, and their small compound was full of laughter. Mama Adana could see in those days. She remembered her husband's face, her son's gap-toothed smile, the green of the yams in their garden. But sickness took her eyes slowly, year by year, like a candle burning down. And then something worse took her husband. A powerful, greedy man had set his eyes on that land near the road. That man was Chief Tunde, and the way he took it would break this family into pieces that took 20 long years to come back together. Let me tell you how it happened. Chief Tunde did not steal the land with guns. He stole it with paper and lies, which is worse, because paper looks innocent. He befriended Papa Obina, drank palm wine with him, called him my brother. Then he offered to help register the land properly at the government office, since Papa Obina could barely read. Papa Obina trusted him. He thumbprinted the documents Tunde brought. But those documents did not protect the land. They signed it away. By the time Papa Obina understood, the land near the road already carried Chief Tunde's name. Papa Obina fought. He went to the elders. He went to court. He begged. But Tunde had money, and money buys long silences in small towns. The stress bent Papa Obina's back and grayed his hair. Then, one rainy night, his heart simply stopped. They said it was his heart. Mama Adana always said it was heartbreak. She buried her husband with borrowed money, now blind, now poor, now alone with one teenage son who had watched his father die fighting a thief in a fine cap. That son was Obina. Young Obina carried a fire in his chest after his father's burial. He was only 16, but he stood at the graveside and swore he would grow up, become bigger than Chief Tunde, and take back everything that man had stolen. His mother begged him to let it go. "Leave it to God, my son," she said. "Bitterness will only eat you." But how do you tell a boy to forget the man who killed his father? Obina could not stay in Umuola, where every corner reminded him of his loss, and every neighbor whispered that his family was finished. So, one morning, with nothing but a small bag and his mother's blessing, he left for the city. He promised he would send money, that he would come back for her. And he did try. For a while, he sent small amounts, but the city is hard, and then the letters stopped, and the money stopped, and the years passed in silence. The whole town decided Obina had done what selfish poor sons do, forgotten his blind mother and run away. But the town was wrong. For 20 years, Mama Adana lived alone in a rented single room in the poor part of Umuola, behind the big market. Every morning she felt her way to the same market corner, set up a small stand, and roasted corn and fried akara over a little charcoal fire. Her hands were fast without her eyes. She could tell when the akara was golden just by the sound of the oil. Children liked her because she gave extra to those who looked hungry. She was not bitter. She still went to church every Sunday, still knelt in her old seat, still prayed for her lost son wherever he was, still forgave the town that had abandoned her. She had almost no one. Almost. Because there was one young woman who had started stopping by her stall every evening after her shift at the small clinic, a nurse named Zuri, the same girl who would one day wipe her face in the dust. Zuri had lost her own mother young, and something in the blind widow's gentle voice filled a hole in her heart. Neither woman knew how much they would soon come to mean to each other. For a short season, life almost smiled on Mama Adana. Zuri helped her buy a bigger bag of corn, a better frying pan, a small umbrella against the sun. Business grew. Customers came. For the first time in years, the old woman went to bed with a full stomach and a little money tied in the corner of her wrapper. She began to hum again while she cooked. Neighbors noticed. "The blind widow is doing well these days," they said in the market. And that simple sentence, that small piece of gossip, traveled from mouth to mouth until it reached the wrong ears. It reached the compound of Chief Tunde. Now, you would think a rich man would not care about a blind woman selling akara, but cruel men cannot see the people they have crushed stand up again, even a little. When Tunde heard that the widow of the man he robbed was getting comfortable, something dark moved in him. He remembered the land, the old case, the fear that one day someone might dig up the truth, and he decided the widow needed to be reminded of her place. That reminder was coming. It started small, the way evil always does. One evening, two rough young men Mama Adana did not know began hanging around her market corner. The next day, a rumor spread through the market like fire in dry grass that the blind widow's food was cursed, that a woman with dead eyes should not be touching food that people eat, that anyone who bought her akara would carry bad luck home. It was nonsense, but fear does not need sense. Customers stopped coming. The children were pulled away by their mothers. Mama Adana sat by her cold charcoal all day, calling out gently, "Fresh corn, fresh akara," to people who now hurried past her. She could not see the disgust on their faces, but she could hear it in their silence. She could not understand what she had done wrong. She had done nothing wrong. But then it got worse. The market union leaders, quietly paid by Chief Tunde's man, came to her corner one morning and told her she could no longer sell there at all. "New rule," they said, and they kicked over her table. Her corn rolled into the gutter. Picture it, a blind old woman on her knees in the dirty market, feeling around in the mud for scattered corn she cannot see, while people step over her and look away. That was the reward for years of gentleness. Zuri found her like that after her shift, and for the first time, the young nurse cried in front of her. "Who is doing this to you, Mama?" she asked. "Who hates a poor woman this much?" Mama Adana had no answer. She truly did not know that the hand crushing her had a name and a fine cap. Zuri wanted to fight, to march to the union office and shout, but the widow held her arm. "No, my daughter," she said. "When you fight powerful people with empty hands, they only crush you more. We will manage." But there was almost nothing left to manage. Her small savings finished within 2 weeks. The rent on her single room came due, and the landlord, who also feared Chief Tunde, suddenly wanted his money in full, or he would throw her things into the street. And she was about to be pushed even further. With nowhere else to turn, Mama Adana did the only thing her heart knew. She went back to the church. Not to sit in any reserved seat this time, but to kneel at the back and beg the church for help, the way the Bible says the house of God should help the widow and the orphan. She waited after service and asked to see Pastor Ayo. She told him everything, the rumors, the market, the rent, her hunger. She reminded him that she had given her small offerings faithfully for over 20 years. Pastor Ayo listened with a soft, false face, said, "We will see what we can do, Mama," and sent her to wait in the side room while the offering was being counted. That side room was a trap, because standing near that offering table, waiting to help count the money, was the head usher, Nkem, the same woman who had her dragged out weeks before. And Nkem had been given one instruction by Chief Tunde's people: make the widow disappear from this town for good. Nkem looked at the pile of offering money, and she smiled. What happened next was arranged like a wicked play. As Mama Adana sat waiting on the bench, Nkem quietly slipped a thick fold of the offering money into the folds of the old woman's wrapper, where a blind woman would never feel it or see it. Then Nkem raised an alarm. "Thief! The offering is short. Somebody has stolen from God." People rushed in. They searched everyone, and of course they found the money exactly where Nkem had hidden it. The whole church gasped. "The blind widow is a thief. after we let her sit here all these years? A woman who steals from God will bring a curse on this whole town." Mama Adana stood shaking, holding money she had never touched, unable to see a single face, unable to prove a single thing. "I did not take it," she wept. "In God's name, I did not." But who listens to a poor blind woman against a rich church's word? Pastor Io declared her banned from the church forever, and by nightfall, the whole town was calling her a thief. Now the town turned fully against her. The gossip that once whispered now shouted, "Thief! Bad luck widow! Did you hear she steals from the church?" Mothers pulled their children indoors when they heard her stick tapping down the road. Somebody threw dirty water on her doorstep. Some boys, cruel the way boys can be when adults teach them cruelty, threw handfuls of sand at her back as she walked, laughing at the way she flinched. She could not see who they were. She could only cover her head and keep walking. In a few short weeks of suffering, Mama Adana lay on her mat, turned her blind face to the ceiling, and asked God quietly if it was not better to simply die. That was how low they had pushed her. But God, or something, was listening, because that same night, while she wept, a stranger was standing outside her landlord's house with a thick envelope of cash. The next morning, the landlord did not come to throw her things in the street. Instead, he came softly, almost afraid, and told her that her rent had been paid, not for 1 month, but for a whole year. "Who paid it?" she asked, shocked. The landlord said he did not know. A quiet man in a plain shirt had come at night, paid in cash, and left no name. That same week, more strange things happened. A big bag of rice appeared at her door, then money pushed under the door while she slept, then a smooth new walking stick left leaning against her wall. Mama Adana could not understand it. She had no one. Who in this world would help a woman the whole town had thrown away? She wept again, but this time from confusion and a tiny, dangerous thing called hope. "Maybe God has not forgotten me," she whispered. She was right that she had not been forgotten, but it was not only God watching over her. It was a son she thought she had lost forever, and he was almost ready to show his face. Now let me tell you the truth the town did not know, the truth that changes this whole story. That quiet man in the plain shirt, the one paying the rent in the dark, the one who had sat in the back row and watched his own mother dragged into the dust, he was Obina. Yes, the same boy who left Umiola 20 years ago with a small bag and a big wound. He had not forgotten his mother. He had not abandoned her. The long silence had a reason. When his letters and his money stopped reaching her all those years ago, it was not because he stopped sending them. Someone in Umiola had been quietly stealing them. What matters now is what Obina became out there in the wide world. He had gone to the city with nothing, slept in motor parks, carried heavy blocks on building sites, and learned, brick by brick, how buildings and money and power really worked. And slowly, over 20 hard years, that boy who carried blocks became a man who owned the companies that built whole city districts. Obina had become very, very rich. But money did not make Obina loud. It made him quiet and careful, the way deep water is quiet. He wore plain shirts on purpose. He watched before he spoke. Men who did big business across the country respected him, and some feared him because he was patient and he missed nothing. For years he had been searching for his mother through people he paid, but Umiola is a small, forgotten town, and its records are poor, and for a long time the trail stayed cold. Then, months before this story began, one of his men finally found her, a blind widow selling akara in a market, going by a name Obina's heart remembered. He could have simply sent money or a car to bring her to the city in comfort, but something told him to come quietly first, to see her life with his own eyes, to understand what these 20 years had done to her. So he flew home, put on old clothes, and walked into that church on a Sunday morning to surprise the mother he loved. Instead, he walked straight into the sight of her being dragged out like rubbish. And in that one terrible moment, standing at the back of the church, Obina understood that if he revealed himself right there, he would rescue her mother from one bad morning, but the wicked people behind it would smile, apologize, and walk free. Chief Tunde would bow, pretend it was all a mistake, and nothing would truly change. Obina did not want a small apology. He wanted the whole truth pulled up by its roots. The land, the lies, his father's death, every hand that had ever touched his mother in cruelty. And to get that, he needed the wicked to keep being wicked while he watched and gathered proof. So he made the hardest choice of his life. He let his mother suffer a little longer while he quietly built a trap around her enemies. He paid her rent in secret to keep her alive, and he began pulling on the very first thread, the stolen land. Obina's people dug quietly into the records of the land near the main road, the land his father had died fighting for. And what they found made his blood run cold and his purpose turn to iron. Chief Tunde had stolen with forged papers all those years ago was the very same land the big church now stood on. That was the secret at the center of everything. Tunde had taken a dead man's land by fraud, then built a shining church on top of it to look holy and untouchable, to wash his own name clean before the whole town. Every Sunday, all those people praised God on soil soaked in a widow's tears, and the widow herself, not knowing, had knelt to pray for 20 years on the very ground her husband was destroyed for. Then Obina made 2 quiet phone calls, one to the best land lawyers in the country, and one to a bank about buying up the many secret debts that Chief Tunde, like all showy men, had been hiding behind his gold watch and his big jeep. Piece by piece, without a single loud word, Obina closed his hand around Chief Tunde's whole world. He found the original land documents, the real ones, his father's ones, kept in an old government file that everyone had forgotten. He found the forged papers and the very clerk, now old and poor, who had been paid to fake them, and that frightened old man was ready to confess in exchange for peace. He quietly bought Tunde's business debts from the banks, so that the proud chief now owed everything to a man whose face he had never even seen. The trap was almost closed. But then something happened that even he, with all his patience and all his money, did not see coming. Because while Obina was hunting the rich enemy in front of his mother, a second enemy was moving against her from the one direction she would never think to guard: her own family. The deepest cut in this whole story was not going to come from Chief Tunde, or Nkem, or the church. It was going to come from her own blood. And it was coming next. Around this time, an old face came back into Mama Adana's dark world, her late husband's younger brother, Uncle Kofi. For 20 years, Uncle Kofi had been far away and useless. But now, suddenly, he appeared at her door full of sweetness. "My brother's wife," he cried, holding her hands. "I heard how this town has been treating you. It is a shame. I have come to help you fight." Mama Adana wept with relief. After so much cruelty, here at last was family, her own blood come to stand with her. Uncle Kofi moved into her compound. He cooked for her, walked her to the stream, spoke gently, and told her he would help her reclaim the very land near the road that her late brother had lost. "That land is your right," he told her, "and I will get it back for you." For the first time in a long time, Mama Adana felt she had a shield standing in front of her. She trusted him completely. She told him everything. She did not know that Uncle Kofi had already been to see Chief Tunde in secret. She did not know that her shield was really a knife. Chief Tunde, feeling a strange new pressure on his business, but not yet knowing where it came from, wanted to lock the stolen land down forever so no one could ever question it again. So he made Uncle Kofi a rich offer. and Uncle Kofi, God forgive him, took it. One quiet afternoon, he brought a paper to Mama Adana. "It is a small thing," he said gently. "Just a paper to help our case. Put your thumb here." Trusting her husband's own brother, the blind woman pressed her thumb on a paper she could not read. But that paper was not for her case. It was a document surrendering forever the family's claim to the land, signed by the widow herself. And Uncle Kofi did not stop there. To fully protect his new master and explain away the family's poverty, he began telling people, and even swore before the town elders, that her brother's widow was a witch, that her bad eyes killed his brother and cursed the land. Her own family called her a witch. That was the deepest cut of all. There are no words for what that betrayal did to Mama Adana. The cruelty of Chief Tunde she could almost understand. He was a wicked stranger. But her husband's own brother, the man she had fed and trusted and called family, selling her for money and calling her a witch before the elders, that broke something in her that even blindness and hunger had never broken. She stopped eating. She stopped speaking. She sat in her dark room facing the wall, waiting to die, believing now that the whole world, even her own blood, had agreed that she was worthless. Zuri came and held her and begged her to eat, but the old woman only whispered, "Let me go, my child. There is nothing left for me here." It seemed the wicked had finally won. The land was signed away. The widow was called a thief and a witch. The son was still a secret, and Chief Tunde was already planning a big public ceremony to celebrate his full ownership of the land, right there in the church, in front of the whole town. But that ceremony, the proud moment he thought would crown him, that was the exact moment Obina had been waiting for. On the day of Chief Tunde's ceremony, the church compound was packed. Tunde had spared no money. There were canopies, plastic chairs, coolers of drinks, a live band, and guests in shining clothes. Pastor Ayo was ready to bless the land, and Kem strutted around in a new galley. Uncle Kofi sat near the front, fat and proud in fine new clothes. And near the back, quiet as always, sat Mama Adana, dragged there by Uncle Kofi so the town could watch the witch surrender her family's land with her own thumbprint and shame the family name forever. Then, in the middle of the celebration, everyone heard it, the deep sound of many engines. The gate opened, and a line of long, black, shining cars rolled slowly into the compound, one after another, until the whole yard fell silent. Doors opened. Serious men in fine suits stepped out, lawyers with briefcases, a famous senior police officer. And then, from the middle car, stepped a calm man in a perfect dark suit and dark glasses, the kind of man whole cities obey. The band stopped playing, and Chief Tunde's proud smile began to shake. The calm man walked slowly through the crowd, and people parted for him without knowing why. He walked straight up to the front, past Chief Tunde, and stopped in front of the frightened blind woman in the back row chair. Gently, so gently, he took off his dark glasses, knelt down in the dust in his expensive suit, and took her trembling hands. "Mama," he said, and his strong voice broke on that one word. "Mama, it is me. It is Obina, your son. I have come home." The blind woman's whole body began to shake. She lifted her blind hands and touched his face, his forehead, his nose, his tears, the way she used to touch him when he was a small boy. "Obina?" she whispered. "My Obina?" "Yes, Mama, I am here, and I saw everything. I saw what they did to you." The whole town stood frozen. The poor stranger they had ignored, the boy they had sworn abandoned his mother, was the powerful man in the black convoy, and he had come home not only for his mother, but for every single person who had hurt her. Obina rose to his feet, and his calm voice carried across the silent compound like a judge's. One by one, his lawyers opened their briefcases, and one by one, the truth came out. First, the land. He held up the real, original documents, proving that the land near the road, the land this very church stood on, had belonged to his late father. And he brought forward the trembling old clerk, who confessed before all the people that Chief Tunde paid him to forge the papers that stole it. The crowd gasped. Then he exposed the church theft. He had quietly found proof, even a frightened junior usher willing to testify, that Nkem herself had hidden the offering money in the blind woman's wrapper. Mama Adana was no thief. Then he turned to the banks and the debts. "Chief Tunde," he said quietly, "every naira of debt hiding behind your big cars and your gold watch, I own it now. Your whole empire has belonged to me for 2 months. You just did not know the name of the man you were bowing to." Chief Tunde's legs gave way, and the great man sat down hard in the dust. Then justice came down on them one by one, and the town watched with open mouths. The senior police officer stepped forward and arrested Chief Tunde right there in his fine Agbada, for fraud, for forgery, for the theft of a dead man's land, old crimes that could no longer stay buried. Nkem, seeing everything crashing down, fell to her knees and confessed to planting the offering money, begging for a mercy she had never once shown anyone. Pastor Ayo tried to slip away quietly, but the whole town now saw the false shepherd for what he truly was, and no one would ever sit under his preaching again. And Uncle Kofi, the brother who had sold his own blood for money and called her a witch, Obina looked at him for a long, cold moment and simply said, "You took my father's letters too, all those years, didn't you?" Uncle Kofi's face told the truth before his mouth could shape a lie, and he broke down weeping, exposed before everyone as the real thief who had cut mother and son apart for 20 years. The paper he had tricked from Mama Adana's thumb was torn to pieces by the lawyers on the spot. It was worth nothing now. When it was all over, Obida did something the town would talk about for years. He lifted his blind mother gently into his arms, carried her back inside the church she had been dragged out of, and set her down in the very front row, in a soft, cushioned chair, in the seat of highest honor, on the land that was now legally hers again. The same people who had watched her dragged through the dust now stood and wept and begged her forgiveness. And Mama Adana, who had every right to curse them, only lifted her face and said, "God has answered me. That is enough." In the days that followed, Obina gave the church land back to the community on one condition, that it would truly serve the poor and the widows, or it would not stand at all. And he did not forget the one person who had shown his mother kindness when kindness cost her something. Zuri, the young nurse who had knelt in the dust and wiped an old woman's face when the whole town looked away, was invited to their home again and again. Obina had watched her too that first morning. He had never forgotten her either. Love did not rush in. Obina was not that kind of man, and Zuri was not that kind of woman. It grew slowly over shared evenings at Mama Adana's side, over quiet talks on the veranda, while the old woman hummed her old songs, now with a full stomach and a peaceful heart. Zuri had loved his mother before she ever knew there was a rich son in the world, and that, to Obina, was worth more than anything money could ever buy. In time, the same town that once called Mama Adana a witch danced at her son's wedding to the kind nurse, and the blind widow sat in the front, feeling her new daughter's face with gentle hands, smiling a smile that had taken 20 years to finally come home. And sometimes, when people asked Obina how he had stayed so calm that first Sunday, how he had watched them drag his own mother and said nothing, he would only smile a little and repeat the 4 quiet words he had whispered from the back row that morning. "I told them," he would say softly, "to remember this day." And Umuwola never, ever forgot it.